الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء وخاتم المرسلين سيدنا ونبينا بالقاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين واللعنة الدائمة الباقية على أعدائهم من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين. Sisters and brothers in Iman, Salamun Alaikum. We, during this month of Ramadan, started with the Tafsir of Surah at-Talaq, which is Surah number 65 of the Quran. As I said in the first evening, that although the name seems to be, a difficult name, but there are issues there. This is actually like a complement to Surah An-Nisa. This is known as a shorter version of Surah An-Nisa, which consists of only about 12 or so ayat. And inshallah we'll try to go through it. The first half of it deals with the issue of marriage, and especially with the issue of talaq and family issues. The other half deals with, it's in a way connected but also a theme by itself. But in between, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also talks about the very important issue of tawakkul and trusting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when we find ourselves in different and difficult situations in life, whether it has to do with rizq or other issues. In the last 2 nights we have been going through the introduction to it, and last night we started with the first ayat of Surah at-Talaq. It's kind of a long ayat where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Ya ayyuhan nabi, إِذَا طَلَّقْتُمُ النِّسَاءَ فَطَلِّقُهُنَّ لِعِدَّتِهِنَّ وَأَحْصُوا الْعِدَّةَ. We talked about the first 3 lines last night, and we will inshallah continue. But even tonight we will not be able to finish the entire ayat. We'll continue that tomorrow because there is quite a lot to say as far as the last a line of that one ayat is concerned. Just to recap with what we said last night, it is actually an ayat where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala addresses the Prophet himself, Ya ayyuhan nabi, O the Prophet, إِذَا طَلَّقْتُمُ النِّسَاءَ, when you intend to divorce women, فَطَلِّقُهُنَّ لِعِدَّتِهِنَّ, then you divorce them at the time of their iddah. Although the address is to the Prophet, but the message is for the ummah. And this is very common when you see some of the ayat of Quran, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to warn the people that this is such an important issue. He sometimes addresses the Prophet directly and many times in a singular form. Here is plural. Although it says, Ya ayyuhan nabi, but here talaqtum, when you men do this. But there are some ayat where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually uses singular tense and pronouns. For example, when it comes to the issue of shirk, or when it comes to the issue of if you prefer the opinions and the you bow down to others compared to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when it comes to the ayat of Quran and the values of Islam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala warns the Prophet himself. Although we know he is on that level of ismat and infallibility, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows that he will not do that. But this is where one more example where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when he talks about talaq, he is addressing the Prophet, but the message is for the ummah itself. The first thing that we talked about, this first part of this ayat number 1, is that this is the first condition. That it should be known that at the time, the talaq should be done at the time of iddah. Iddah means the time where the wife would be during the waiting period from talaq till the finalization of the divorce. And the main condition there is the issue of purity, that it has to be during the purity from after the last cycle, before the divorce, and in the time when there were no relations had taken place. Just to go back to those who are probably joining us for the first time, yesterday we talked about how Islam has made marriage very easy, and when it comes to divorce, Islam has allowed it, but it has not made it that easy. In aqd, there are no issues of purity. A person, the man and a woman could be in their najasat state, doesn't matter. In whatever state they are, aqd would still be valid. But when it comes to talaq, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts some restrictions there. It's just a way of saying, don't rush into this decision. Think about it. And one way is forcing people to, reconsider or think about it is by, putting hurdles in the way before you come to the decision. So maybe, if you wait for the next month, maybe the views would have changed. And so by saying that in their iddah, basically talaq is linked with the time in which she is free from her cycle as well as free from any relationship. And this is, as I said, very important in the Shia fiqh. We do not believe that a talaq recited in privacy between husband and wife without witnesses, as it is done in the other madhab or madahib, it is not acceptable in the Shia mazhab. There is the issue of timing, the condition of the wife, as well as the issue of witnessing. And talaq, done outside this, without those two conditions there, will be considered to be null and void from the Shia point of view. Even in Sunni tafsir, actually under this ayat, there is a narration about Abdullah bin Umar, who had divorced his wife during the time of her cycle. When the father mentioned that to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Prophet told Umar, go to your son and say to him that his wife is still his wife, and what he has done is not considered to be talaq and divorce. The ayat then goes on, and this is where the last statement, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَأَحْسُوا الْعِدَّةِ, which calculate the iddah. When the talaq is done, you have to make a note when it was done, till 3 cycles or 3 months. Because that is an important issue that the husband and wife both should know about it. And this is where we come to this is the second command in that one ayat. Why should they keep track of their time of iddat? Number one, there are certain rules that both of them have to follow and to observe during the iddah. And number two, the divorce becomes final only when the iddah comes to the end. And this is where, it's very important to know the timing. One more thing before we go on to the next line in that ayat is that this is actually the scenario of the talaq where the husband is divorcing the wife. In the Sharia there are 3 types of divorce. One is simply known as talaq, where the husband initiates, he doesn't want to continue this relationship. The second is where the wife initiates that. She doesn't want to continue this relationship, and that is known as khula. And the third one is mubarat. And you know what is mubarat? You know tabarra? You know what is tabarra? Mubarat, this is tabarra at home, between the husband and wife. They don't, there is mutual dislike towards one another. So, and that is known as mubarat. So you have one which is talaq, where the husband is divorcing the wife. Then you have khula, where the initiation is done by the wife to get out of that relationship. And then there is mubarat, where both want to get out of it. And the rules and implications of all 3 divorces are different. This is just so that you have the information about it. Don't. This is. We will come to the message which are in these ayat, later at the end of the discussion. Now the iddah. How long is the iddah to be observed by the wife? There is an ayat in Surah Baqarah where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَالْمُطَلِّقَاتِ يَتَرَبَّصْنَ بِأَنفُسِهِنَّ ثَلَاثَةَ قُرُوءٍ. That the women who are divorced, they have to wait for 3 cycles of purity. Or 3 months, whatever happens comes first. And so that's known that the 3 months is the time for iddah. Let me just see how much you have the general knowledge. What about a case where the wife loses the husband, he dies? There is also an iddah that she has to observe. How long is that? 4 months and 10 days. And that is known as iddah of wafat. This is iddah of talaq. There is a lot of confusion. Sometimes, in the divorce cases, I hear, the woman will call and say, so, should I not wear, clothes associated with happy occasions? Well, I say, your husband is still alive. He's divorced you, but he's still alive. Those rules are only for when iddat of wafat. So the rulings are different for iddat wafat and the iddah of talaq. We are talking here about 3 months, which is the iddat of talaq. Immediately Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then, after mentioning this couple of rules about talaq, He comes to this command, وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ رَبَّكُمْ. And fear Allah. The literal meaning would be, fear Allah, your Lord. Why would He start with that statement after mentioning 1 or 2, 3, rulings about divorce? And this is the reality, how Muslim, societies have moved away from the concepts of Quran and what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala expects from them. And this is where we see that وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ رَبَّكُمْ and fear. It's not that Allah, na'uzubillah, is a monster. When we talk about taqwa, it doesn't mean fearing Allah. Rather, it's fearing displeasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because our relationship with Allah is based on love, not a fear of a negative kind. Let's say the Iraqis during the days of Saddam feared Saddam. And a Muslim is also supposed to fear Allah. The fear are not of the same foundation, or the reason for the fear is different. There is zulm. Here is fear of displeasing somebody whom you love. Because your relationship with Allah is based on love, you have to fear displeasing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that is the meaning of taqwa. And that only comes when a person has this consciousness of Allah's presence in whatever he does. Taqwa is not only for Ramadan, taqwa is not only for Muharram, taqwa is not only when you go for ziyarat to Karbala, taqwa is not only when you go for Hajj in Mecca. It is for all the time and all the places. Sometimes people think, well, to be muttaqi, when you do namaz, make sure you do it in the right way. Then you go back to a business place and then you are the biggest fraud there in doing business. And then again, namaz time comes and again you go and do the namaz in the best way. This is where we have to realize that, taqwa has to be there in whatever state. When we come to the family life, when things are okay, well, I think that's where people forget Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But the issue is that when you have difficulties in family, that's where you should be more conscious of Allah's presence in what you are doing. You have to control your emotions and make decisions the way it is going to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Unfortunately, people like me who handle many marital disputes, taqwa is the last thing in the minds of both men and women. They don't even think about it at that time. There is vengeance. They just want to destroy one another. And this is what I'm saying, that these ayat, are the ayat where people have to, study them and think about it. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala begins by saying, وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ رَبَّكُمْ. And then He talks about another ruling about the case of talaq, what is to be done in the iddah. See, there is no wow here. No comma, no full stop there. وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ رَبُّكُمْ. Fear displeasing Allah, your Lord. لَا تُخْرِجُوهُنَّ مِنْ بُيُوتِهِنَّ. It is your duty that you do not turn them out of their homes during the time of iddah. This is when the husband is divorcing the wife. There are certain issues that we have to keep in mind. Number one, although this is the most, disliked permission that Allah has given, known as, talaq, this is something we have to always keep in mind when we talk about the issue of divorce. Now, where does the wife stay during the time of the iddah for the 3 months? According to this ayat of Quran, there is no wa there, لَا تُخْرِجُوهُنَّ. And do not, surely. The shadda there with the noon is just to emphasize, the intensity of that order, that do not surely turn them out of their homes. So when a husband gives a divorce to the wife, it is his duty, not to force her out. Nor should she leave the house. And there is a reason for it, and we'll deal with that in the last sentence of the ayat, inshallah, tomorrow. Number two, at that time, and this is not in the ayat of Quran, but it is there in the ahadith from the Prophet and the Imams, that during that 3 months of iddah, the husband has to continue to provide for her as far as the basic necessities are concerned. And number three, although the talaq has been done, during the iddah time, if the husband dies, the wife still has the right to inherit from him. Or if the wife dies, the husband still has the right to inherit from her. And so although the talaq has been recited, but the talaq will only become final in this first case of category of divorce when the iddah comes to the end. And that is why she has a right to stay put where she is, in the house of the husband or the house that he has provided. And they also have a right to inherit one another if one or the other dies at the time of iddah. The only exception where the wife can be asked to move out is only if she has committed indecency. Or, while she is there during time of the iddah, the language and the attitude reaches to a level where it becomes unbearable. And this is where we have to realize that yes, the leeway has been given there, but it is, curtailed only in these two situations. Now what happens after that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, after mentioning this issue, especially about the right of the wife to stay in the home and to be provided by the husband for the 3 months, and they have a right to inherit one another if one passes away, during the time of iddah, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala goes back to this issue of, the warning that He is giving. If you look at it, this part of this first ayat starts with a warning. وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ رَبَّكُمْ. Fear displeasing you, Allah your Lord. And then He says, وَتِلْكَ حُدُودُ اللَّهِ. These are the limits that Allah has put on you. وَمَنْ يَعْتَدْ حُدُودَ اللَّهِ. And whoever, violates, goes beyond the limits that Allah has put on him, then this person is not harming Allah, he is actually harming himself, because he is making himself or herself liable for the azab of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is one more thing that we have to realize. These days there is a trend among some Muslims, Shia and Sunni alike, to look at the ayat of Quran, and when it comes to the family laws, especially the laws which do not seem to be in line with the Western secular liberal theology or thinking, immediately they will say, oh, Rasulullah lived in the 7th century in Arabia, so they would like to tie these rules and regulations to a time and a place of, when the Quran was revealed. And they would like to say this is to be suspended. Look at the seriousness of this ayat. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala begins by saying, وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ رَبُّكُمْ. Number one, fear displeasing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then He says, these are the hudud, these are the limits that I'm describing to you about how you should conduct yourself in a difficult situation where you have dispute in the family life. And this is where we have to realize that, these laws are there and the warnings have come in a very clear way. How do the Muslim men and women behave in situations of divorce? Unfortunately, very rare cases where we have seen where people would exercise taqwa, in dealing with these issues. And this is where we have to always go back, to this concept of taqwa as the important, element and the foundation of our life. One of the first things that happens is that when the husband gives the divorce, the first thing is that you go back home. And what does the ayat of Quran say? That وَلَا تُخْرِجُوهُنَّ مِنْ بُيُوتِهِنَّ. Nobody wants to even read about it. And this is where, when we look at the reality, we really have to go back to the basics of the values that Allah has given to us through the Quran and the Ahlul Bayt alayhimu salatu wassalam. Salawat. The problems, of course, are not just limited to the Shias or Sunnis or Muslims. It is worldwide. In almost every part of the world, even the countries which are really trying to base their system on the Islamic principles. It is not an easy issue, and this is what I'm saying. That's why I initially was hesitating whether I should even talk about this or not. Because if you look at the following surah, Surah at-Tahrim, that is actually a surah which gives us the example of the challenges that people can face in marital life. You have the example of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And two of his wives who really bothered him. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala basically censured them in a very strong terms in that Surah Tahrim. Uses very strong words in a way saying that, do not think he's alone. Allah is his supporter. And not only Allah, they are malaika, there is Jibreel and there is a mu'min. It's a singular term there. There is a mu'min there who is supporter of Rasulullah. लिहाजा उनको तनहा मत समझना. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brings himself and Malaika and Jibreel and Ali as those who are the supporters of Rasulullah. So, don't think he's alone. And so after the example of Rasulullah, where the example is of sabr. Many people say, oh, why didn't we have the permission to marry so many wives like Rasulullah? The question is, first of all, bring in yourself that sabr that Rasulullah had. Because not all of those marriages were that, glossy and, made of, the bed of roses. No. There were challenges. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that as an example to us. That Rasulullah faced challenges, but still he maintained sabr. And then you see the example of Prophet Nuh and Prophet Lut comes in Surah Tahrim. Another two Anbiya. And so you have a situation where you have these examples, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ends with a reverse situation. In those we had Anbiya who were husbands, and the wives who were challenged. In the last example, it is reversed. You have Asiya, mentioned there at the end of Surah Tahrim, and where she is struggling with the challenge of a person like Fir'aun. And this is where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because she, and this is what I say to the people, that when you face different situations in life, think about it. Think about yourself as Nuh. Maintain that sabr. And if you have a problem with your husband, remember Asiya. Fir'aun was somebody who used to say, Ana Rabbukumul Ala. Claiming himself to be the God. And what happens? She actually bears all the difficulties until when he tried to force her to abandon the message of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. She was the queen of that land. Whatever she wanted from this dunya, she had at her disposal. But she gave everything up for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, until Fir'aun actually crucified her. And at the end you will see that the dua she has after she has been put on the cross, that Allah, build for me a palace, a house in Jannah, and give me, salvation from the zulm of Fir'aun. And according to the riwayat that we have, that the vision came to her right in the last moments of her life, on the cross, crucified, where she saw the palace that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had reserved for Asiya. And so she left this dunya as a shaheeda, but with a smile on her lips, because of her sabr and patience in dealing with a husband like Fir'aun. So, there are many, Muslim ladies who have Fir'auns at their homes. And then there are many, Muslim men who are Nuhs and they have wives there. But these examples in Surah Tahrim, immediately coming after Surah Talaq, is actually to give that example of sabr and the issue of taqwa and maintaining the hudud and the limits that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put upon us. Salawat. Let me end with one hadith where emphasizing the message that I gave on the first night, that in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, a house in Islam built on the basis of marriage, ahab, is the most beloved in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And a house in Islam, in the Muslim society, which is destroyed because of divorce is the most disliked thing. So they are opposites. The aqd on one side and talaq on the other side. And the issue of, getting involved in getting a mu'min and a mu'mina married, this is a very noble deed. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala likes it. We presented you one hadith before, one statement from another hadith where it says, وَكَانَ لَهُ بِكُلِّ خُطْوَةٍ خَطَاهَا. If a person is trying to make two individuals, a mu'min and a mu'mina, and he goes to one and then to the other, they have more meetings, and he is there as the intermediary, the number of steps that he takes to do that noble work. The Imam says for every step that he took and for every word that he uttered in getting a mu'min and a mu'mina, tied into marriage, that one step or one word in that cause is equal to 1 year's good deeds, where he prayed the whole night and fasted all the days of that year. And this is where we have to realize that, especially in this part of the world, we don't have that network which we had in our own home countries. And this is where, it becomes more important for people to get involved in this process. Salawat. Inshallah, we had the quiz on Saturday and Sunday. We'll do that on Friday, Saturday and Sundays. But for tonight, I would just like to clarify one mas'ala. Last night, one of the questions was about use of puffer while a person is fasting. And what was the answer? Is it okay or not? It is okay because the vapors go in the respiratory tract and not in the food passage. However, there is one caution which must be mentioned here, that the remnant of the medicine might be there in the mouth. And gradually you might be swallowing it with your saliva. So whenever you use the puffer, especially when you are fasting, you should go and gargle so that your mouth is clear. And so it's not going to harm your fast, but this is just a precaution that you should take just to make sure that you have not really swallowed anything after it. We have, I think, 4 minutes, so maybe one question anybody has? The ruling about swimming when you are fasting, there is no issue. Majority opinion, almost 99% of the opinion is that you can swim, but do not put your head under the water. Ayatollah Sistani is on a minority view on this issue. He says, even if you dip in with your head under the water, it doesn't harm your fast. But I would say, go with the precaution there. And so you can go and swim, but don't go underwater. Yeah. Yes.
What about traveling in a day when you are out of your town, you come back before Zuhur or something?
If you come back to your town before Zuhur, provided you did not eat or drink anything outside, you came back, then you can do the niyat at that time to fast, and that would be okay. If it is after Zuhur, you have missed that day.
So we have children who are coming from the mothers and from far away outside the hut. We cannot make it back to
Well, during the question is about the madrasa students who live very far away outside the Orfi, Greater Toronto area. In that case, during the month of Ramadan, for them it will be difficult. Either the madrasa should arrange something for them online, maybe, or give them, lessons after Zuhr, but not before Zuhr.
Just want a clarification. If I left Toronto at 6 in the morning and came back before Zuhr, I went to Niagara Falls and came back before Zuhr, is that okay?
Yes. If you did not eat, yes. What you are hearing now is the latest opinion. Okay, salawat.